Mini are a brand which has basically lost fans over the years. The original Mini was a huge hit, but over time, passion from enthusiasts slowly wore away. Why though? What happened? I'm going to tell you that today.
In 2001, BMW reopened the Cowley plant in Oxford and started building their replacement to the Mini. Now, since reinventing an icon is so difficult, many people expected this to be, well, a flop. Except it wasn't. Everyone loved it. It was better than the original. It handled better thanks to new suspension. It was bigger and it was faster. In fact, this car's new suspension was so much better than the original car. In fact, it rode better, it was more comfortable, and it was better on track. However, crucially, it still retained that same go-kart feel that the original had. However, there were a few problems. It was still far too small. Rear access was difficult, and they weren't that reliable. Now, for the second one, in 2006, Mini decided to address these problems. However, they were a bit lazy. They made it longer, wider and taller by just a few centimetres, so it was still too small. And they even added a little bit more power. Well, when I say a bit more, they only added 10 more horsepower to the Cooper S, so it now has 175, which was nowhere near competitive enough. So it still wasn't fast enough and it was still too small. And to make matters even worse, reliability was no better. In fact, while the first Mini had an engine developed by Chrysler and BMW, the second Mini was equipped with an engine made by Peugeot, which is one of the worst engines in Europe. However, this generation did cause Mini to diversify. They added the Countryman, the Paceman, the Roadster, and even a coupe. However, they all had the same problems. To make matters worse, the Mini went from one of the best cars you could buy to one of the worst cars you could buy. Automotive journalists didn't like this car as much as the original, and as I've said, it's pretty clear to see why.
Third time around, Mini listened to what the people wanted. More power? Tick. The Cooper went from having 115 horsepower to having 135. And that's not all. They added something that many people have been asking for since launch. 5 doors. And now, you can get in the back. The interior still looked the same, except the dials were actually facing the driver rather than the middle passenger. However, there were still some issues. Primarily, the boot. It was big, but still smaller than its competitors. Even adding this handy under tray didn't help. Reliability improved too. In fact, Mini scored an above average rating when they used a BMW made engine. No collaboration was made between BMW and any other manufacturer. This is all BMW's work, this engine. Now the car was bigger, you'd expect the critics to be a bit happier, but they weren't. They thought the Mini was now too big. So they didn't really strike a balance. They kind of make the car bigger a bit literally. But luckily the 5 doors were a good idea. So next time you think of Mini, don't think that it's some hairdresser's car. Don't judge the car by its stereotype. At least not always. This is a great car. It still is. Sure, it doesn't really capture the spirit of the original, but it's still a fantastic car. Enthusiasts everywhere, buy a Mini.